The police arrived in 3 cars. I remember standing in my basement, watching officers descend the stairs with flashlights, their radios crackling against the heavy silence. I called them that morning, my voice shaking as I explained what I'd found. A sealed room, a table set for 2, a newspaper from 1962.
And your grandmother?
Detective Morrison asked, her pen poised over her notebook.
Disappeared 50 years ago. Officially, she was presumed dead.
She exchanged a glance with her partner. I could see it in her eyes, the question I'd been asking myself since I'd broken through that brick wall. Who was my grandfather keeping in there? They spent an hour looking. 1 hour. That's how long it took them to realize what I hadn't yet grasped. The sealed room had to have an entrance. A real entrance. Something my grandfather used every single day for 50 years. I watched them search the basement methodically. They ran their hands along walls, tested the integrity of floorboards, examined pipes and foundations. They were looking for a door, a passage, something. But there was nothing.
It has to be here,
Morrison said, frustration creeping into her voice.
People don't just appear in sealed rooms. There has to be...
The rug.
I said quietly. I'd lived in this house for 3 weeks now, and I'd barely noticed it. A threadbare Persian carpet, faded almost to gray, lying in the corner near the water heater. My grandfather's carpet. I'd been stepping over it every time I went to check on the renovations. One of the officers bent down and pulled it back. Beneath it, a trap door. Oak wood, iron hinges, thick with dust. My stomach turned. The trapdoor groaned as they opened it. Cold air rushed up from below, the kind of cold that carries the weight of decades. The kind that smells like earth and stale water, and things that have been locked away too long.
Stay back,
Morrison said, though her eyes never left the darkness beneath the trap. But I didn't stay back. I couldn't. I watched as one officer descended the wooden stairs slowly, flashlight beam cutting through the black. The others waited, hands on their belts, faces hard with something I couldn't name. Then the officer's voice crackled through his radio.
We have a basement room. Small kitchen setup. Appears lived in.
Morrison turned to me. Her expression had changed. The skepticism was gone, replaced by something like pity.
How long?
I asked.
What?
How long do you think she was down there?
She didn't answer. We descended one at a time. The stairs were narrow, barely wider than my shoulders. The walls were concrete, unpainted and weeping moisture. As I reached the bottom, my eyes adjusted to the dim light, and I saw it. A small room, maybe 12 by 15 feet. A kitchenette in one corner, with a stove that hadn't worked in decades. A cot pushed against the far wall, neatly made. Shelves lined with canned goods, bottles of water, stacks of old books. And above it all, a small window, bricked over from the outside. My grandfather had built this himself. I was certain of it. He'd sealed the window, poured the concrete, installed the trap door. He'd kept his secret for 50 years. But the questions still hung in the air, like the dust caught in our flashlight beams. What was he protecting? Or what was he hiding?
There's another door,
one of the officers said, pointing to the far end of the room. It was small, almost child-sized, made of heavy wood. The kind of door you'd see in an old Victorian, built when people were smaller, or when they wanted to hide something away completely. Morrison approached it slowly. She reached for the handle. The metal was cold. Her hand trembled slightly as she turned it. The door didn't open. She tried again, harder this time. Still nothing.
She's still in there.
My heart was pounding now. Because if the door was locked from the inside, that meant...
She's still in there.
I whispered. Morrison pounded on the door. 3 hard knocks. Official. Authoritative.
Police! Open the door!
Nothing. Another officer shouldered his way past her and threw himself against the wood. Once. Twice. On the 3rd impact, the old hinges gave way and the door swung inward. We all held our breath. The room beyond was dark. Darker than the kitchen, despite being connected to it. A bedroom, I realized. Another small room, sealed and hidden and trapped in time. Morrison stepped through, flashlight raised. I heard her gasp. And then I heard something else. A voice. Thin and reedy and breaking with decades of disuse.
Thomas? Thomas, is that you? Thomas?
She said again, and her voice cracked on his name.
Mom,
Morrison began carefully, stepping forward with her hands raised.
my name is Detective Morrison. You're safe now. You're safe.
But the old woman wasn't looking at the detective. She was looking at me. She tilted her head, confused, and then, slowly, recognition seemed to dawn in those wild eyes.
You have his face, she said. You're his grandchild. Yes, I remember. He was going to have a...
She trailed off, her hands fluttering at her sides like dying birds. One of the officers moved to steady her, but she flinched away.
Don't touch me. I'm not clean. I haven't been clean in... how long? Thomas said I needed to stay down here. He said it was for the best. He said the world wasn't safe for me. He said I was... sick.
My throat was closing up.
What's your name?
Morrison asked gently. The old woman looked at her, confused by the question.
Eleanor. My name is Eleanor. Eleanor Margaret Foster.
She said finally, my grandmother's full name. The woman who'd disappeared in 1962 was standing in front of me, speaking in a voice like wind through an abandoned house. They took her to the hospital. The doctors confirmed what my grandfather must have known 50 years ago. My grandmother had severe mental illness, dementia with violent episodes, paranoia, delusions. The kind of illness that, in 1962, would have meant institutionalization, asylum, a life locked away from the world. My grandfather had made a different choice. He'd locked her away himself, in the basement of the house he owned. He'd fed her. He'd kept her alive. He'd changed her bedding and her clothes and spent every night sitting at that table in the sealed room, setting a place for her, hoping that one day she might join him. That one day she might be lucid enough to remember his name without confusion. For 50 years he waited. For 50 years she lived in darkness. And for 50 years he told the world she was dead. My grandmother lived for 2 more years after we found her. The asylum was cleaner than my grandfather's basement. The doctors were kinder than his silence. But she never truly left that hidden room. Her mind was too far gone, too fractured by decades of isolation and untreated illness. She'd ask for Thomas constantly, confused about where he'd gone, why he wasn't setting the table anymore. I visited her every week. On her deathbed, she took my hand and asked me to tell her husband something. Her grip was surprisingly strong, and her eyes were clearer than I'd seen them since we pulled her from the dark.
Tell him that I was always waiting for him to come back too.
I never told her he was dead. Some mercies are kinder than truth. I never painted that north wall. The renovations stopped. I sealed the trapdoor again, left the carpet where it was, and never went back down to that basement. Some of the contractors refused to work there after they learned what had been found. Others just asked quietly if I wanted them to take down the concrete ceiling off the bricked window. I told them to leave it. My grandfather's warning, "The old brick needs to breathe," took on a new meaning. He wasn't talking about airflow or structural integrity. He was talking about his secret. He was talking about the weight of keeping someone hidden, about how that weight needs space, needs air, or it suffocates you along with whoever you're keeping locked away. I sold the house a year later. I told the real estate agent there was a structural issue in the basement that made it undesirable for renovation. She didn't push. Real estate agents can sense these things. The weight of secrets that have seeped into the walls. People ask me if I think my grandfather was a monster. I don't know how to answer that. He was a man who loved his wife so much that he couldn't bear to see her locked away in an institution. So he locked her away himself, in the only place he could control, where he could see her, where he could pretend that someday, somehow, she might come back to him. He was also a man who stole 50 years from another human being. Both things are true. Both things haunt me. Every night, I sometimes think I hear the sound of his footsteps on basement stairs that don't exist in any house I've ever lived in. The soft clink of dishes being set on a table, the scrape of a chair being pulled back, waiting for someone to sit. And I wonder if he's still down there, in some basement somewhere, still waiting for her to remember his name. But sometimes, late at night, I still hear knocking from inside the walls,